What's up, fam? What's up, early humanities people? I'm in the firelight, the medieval setting. It's actually just red LEDs. I'm in my brother's room because he's got a closed door and thought it would work well. And then he turned off the lights, and so we got the red LEDs, and I was like, keep it. It's a good medieval vibe. So if you didn't recognize by those two hints, I went with the medieval essay question. And so basically, the question was saying, the prompt was saying that the medieval times were backwards, and that a lot of people assumed that they didn't have a lot of technological advancements or progressions. They thought it was a regressive area or era. And if you think about it, the thing that I kind of was going over in my essay that I would like for you to look at is that it's in between the antiquity times and it's in between the Renaissance times periods. So if you think about that, that's why it's called the Middle Ages. That's why it's called the medieval era. And that name alone kind of makes it insignificant. Like it's just in between these two periods that are really significant because you have the Romans and all of their awesomeness, the Byzantine Empire in classical antiquity, and then you have the Renaissance, which both of those periods are really focused on. But then you get to the Middle Ages, and it's kind of just thrown out of the in the rear view. Like, does it really matter? It's not that big of a deal. But I'm here to say that it is a big deal, and that they made a lot of technological advancements, and that it laid the groundwork for a ton of things like chemistry, biology, zoology, um, mathematics, a lot of different sciences, medicine. You had anesthetics that started being used, anesthesias that started being used, gunpowder, cannons, the first firearms, a lot of really interesting stuff that laid the groundwork for future generations and future periods to become really significant. Out of this period, some of the chemistry that was done actually led to oil paintings being an option for artists. So you kind of think like Middle Ages, my thought, if you look at my thought is like a dark, damp, grungy castle. You have peasants in the mud, and it's just dirty, and nobody really wants to live in the medieval era. But in fact, I think it would have been still oppressive. You still had those tyrannical, patriarchal type of governments in play, but there were still a lot of advancements in technology and stuff that we need to give some props to, and that we need to you know have some respect and some and appreciation for, because it's a significant era. So I'm gonna see if my slides will come up, and that will continue recording. So that's still recording. So you can't see my slides, but if you hop on here, you can kind of go along with me. So you have medieval technology, you have the assumption that I had, and that's of these kind of beaten down Gothic kind of castles and stuff. You have people without rights, poor, dirty, damp, oppressed castles, darkness, rain, not a lot of greenery in my imagination. Um, but I think that there were actually a lot of advancements during this time. And if you do the research, it's pretty evident that throughout the years, people have kind of wrote it off as an insignificant era without a lot of technological advancements or scientific improvements or inventions or advancements. But in fact, it was actually quite progressive in those elements. As I said, we have some medicines, we have botany being separated from zoology in under the realm of biology so that medicine is better understood. We have the first usage of numbers, and Fibonacci sequence comes around in this era. And the cool thing about this is that a lot of the science, astronomy, and mathematics actually comes from the East. So you have China, India, and the Middle Eastern countries giving us the things like the classical 1, 2, 3 type of counting um, thing that we use today. And you have the poles first being kind of discovered, and a lot of interesting stuff like the wheel being used as an energy source. The wheel was first used as a source of energy from these rotating bookshelves that monks use. So it's interesting to see how it started in the East and spread to the West and had a revitalization of science and medicine and mathematics in the West, especially in Europe, is what I'm really talking about. So I think it's important to note and give appreciation to those civilizations that actually were keeping up with those topics and those fields of study, and that spread it and made it an interest in the European countries. So during this period, you have some of the first eyeglasses. People realize that you can use lenses of glass to help with nearsightedness. So on slide 4, you can kind of see these rudimentary type of eyeglasses. And then gunpowder is one of those things that came from the East. The Chinese actually created gunpowder. So you have cannons and weapons and all sorts of things that are coming from the East and that are being incorporated slowly as they become more predominant and more available for armies. But it's definitely a Middle Ages creation, and something that, once again, it goes back to giving respect and notability to the Chinese who created gunpowder and the first firearms, which shaped the way that humanity and humans would interact for the rest of history, in my opinion. And then on slide 6, if you look at it, we have the water wheel. These are two different types of the water wheel on the left. I think that during this time, although it was still oppressive and damp and muddy, there were a lot of inventions that aided the poor. A couple of my sources talked about how the rotation of crops came back around in this time. So people were rotating their crops, which means that the soil gets time to rebuild its nutrients so that you're able to get the maximum amount of efficiency from it. And so that's one thing that makes it so that the poor people were able to get more food. But then you also have, on slide 6 here, these water wheels. The water wheel was around before this era, but the full power and potential was really harnessed during this era, where it was used for furnaces that would forge iron, and it was used to grind grain, and it was used for pulleys to build things like the Duomo in Florence, and to make massive construction projects that would not have been possible without this power. And that's important because in Europe there's a lot of water sources, so these types of energy were very predominant and efficient. And so the grinding of grain especially would have been helpful for the regular man. And then also if steel or iron is more readily available to be forged into hoes or shovels and things like that, then the everyday working man could have profited off of that. And then on slide 6, if you look on that right, the first iron plowshares were created during this time. So that means that plowing and tending to fields would have become a lot easier and a lot less tacking on your body, would have taken less of a toll is what I mean. And it would have given people more time. It would have been all around more efficient. So with the progression of technology, I think that the lives of these people would have been better. And I think that goes back in to prove that it was not a backward time completely. Surely there was some backwardness and regressiveness in some of the things they did, maybe politically or socially, but technologically, I think it was progressive. If you go over and down to slide 7, you will see a picture of the Florenzi Dome, and then this is just a cathedral that is a medieval style. It's very decadent and has a ton of stylings on it, and different tiers to it, arches, kind of a Gothic vibe. So there's a lot going on with that. But the Florence Dome, Duomo, as they say, you can actually go up to the top there and go around, which I have done. I did that a couple of weeks ago, which was amazing. Um, and you walk up in between the dome and like the concrete underneath. That was very cool to do. I think it's 422 steps up and then the same amount down. Tight stairwells and a lot of twirly stairs. So that was really enjoyable. And it was the biggest dome of its time, and it broke the world, the architectural world, and like the possibilities that were around. So once again, we have a representation of how the Middle Ages, the medieval era, was actually very progressive because architecturally and construction was able to be made in much larger and more elaborate ways because of the technology and the tools that they had to move things up and down and to structure it so that it wouldn't collapse in on itself, which was a really big problem before. Um, so a lot of these inventions, some of them were already around, but they were perfected, and then others like the eyeglasses or Canon were prototypes, rudimentary inventions for things that would come and change human interaction and how humans lived for the rest of history. I believe like eyeglasses are pretty crucial. They really help a lot of people. So it would have been crazy if they hadn't been discovered for another two eras or another couple thousand years. Um, so it's pretty amazing the inventions and technology that they had during the Middle Ages, and it just goes to show that they were not backwards. And it's the more history that we find about it, the more we learn that science was allowed and that they were, still searching to advance in civilizations and society. um, that's really all I got. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned a little something. That's just kind of scrapes the surface about the reason that the Middle Ages were not backwards and how they were technologically progressive and advancing and innovated in different things that were already around. Thanks for watching and hope you have a good one. Thanks for having me in your class.